Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Suisuiki. Coming up,
we cannot be talking about ending the war without guaranteeing Israel its right to peaceful existence.
world leaders deliberate on a two-state solution. Also,
we have done quite a lot, as well as the promotion of gender equality.
Samoa's opposition leader confirms his final term, and Manu Samoa have one more chance to qualify for the Rugby World Cup. Most of the world is calling for a two-state solution in Gaza and the West Bank, but Pacific nations are going against the tide, with the majority opposed or choosing to remain silent. An international politics expert says the position risks undermining the principle of self-determination. Tiana Hexton has more.
Palau was among the 5 Pacific countries that voted against the UN resolution for a two-state solution earlier this month at the General Assembly in New York. Those listening to President Surangale Whipps Jr.'s address to the UN Assembly this month, though, could be forgiven for thinking he'd do the exact opposite.
We believe that a durable solution, one that envisions two peoples, Israelis and Palestinians living in two democratic states, side by side, in peace and in dignity and security, within mutually recognized borders, is essential for lasting peace.
President Surangale Whipps Jr. wasn't the only one who raised eyebrows over a lack of consistency. Fiji Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka, who has been a strong supporter of Israel, was among 4 Pacific nations who either abstained from voting or did not register a vote.
We cannot be talking about ending the war without guaranteeing Israel its right to peaceful existence. For peace, we collectively have a responsibility to seeing this is done. Anything short is hypocrisy on our part. The cost of building peace is usually high, yet the cost of its absence is higher.
International politics expert Dr. Shannon Brincat says the conflict poses deep questions which cut across geopolitics, religion, and human rights. The senior lecturer at the University of the Sunshine Coast says those interact in different ways across the region.
What I've found is that it's actually religious claims that are one of the primary causes behind this shift. Widespread entrance of evangelical churches across the Pacific, which hold a specific theology around Christian Zionism.
He says Solomon Islands, which with the Marshall Islands made up the 2 Pacific Island nations, not counting New Zealand and Australia, that supported a two-state solution, appeared to be talking a more politically independent stance.
The Solomons is an interesting case. It started off with the security arrangements with China, which came as somewhat of a shock in the other Western states in the Pacific. So I think it's an exemplar of that more independent line. But again, you see the same demographic changes within the basis of church groups and believers in that state.
New Zealand offered its own compromise of sorts, with the Foreign Minister Winston Peters voting in support of a two-state solution, but refraining from recognising Palestine as a state.
New Zealand's recognition of Palestinian statehood now would serve as little more than an existential act of defiance against an unalterable state of affairs. We are not ready to make that gesture.
Shannon Brincat says Pacific nations must think carefully about the long-term implications of going against a two-state solution when there are clear similarities between the challenges facing Palestinian people and Pacific communities.
So that diplomatic contradiction is coming to the fore because a lot of these same Pacific Island states are relying on self-determination for their own existential needs, and yet not fully recognising it or sometimes voting against it in other contexts.
Going forward, the conflict and proposal for a two-state solution will remain a huge talking point, particularly as leaders return home from the UN in New York. The official vote on the UN resolution came in with 142 members supporting a two-state solution, 10 against it, including Israel, and 12 members abstaining.
That was Tiana Hexton with that report. Samoa's longest-serving Prime Minister, Tuilaipa Sailele Malielingauoi, says his political career is nearing its end after more than 40 years in Parliament. The 78-year-old has confirmed this will be his final term, though he intends to see it through. Grace Viva-Ai spoke to Tuilaipa at the HRPP headquarters in Apia and began by asking him what are some of the highlights from his career.
If you had to pick one highlight, what would I know?
Just give one highlight, because there were so many of them. Others were the building of high-rise buildings through assistance from our partners. The shifting of the international dateline to ensure that we have the same working week with our business partners, between our business people and their partners in New Zealand, Australia, and Japan, which are in the same time zone. We have done quite a lot, as well as the promotion of gender equality, not only through issues relating to the support for women, issues in the United Nations, but also passing laws to ensure that not less than 10% or 6 women to enter Parliament, which means if they don't meet it on the first reading of the results, then we pick them from the highest percentage points procured during the election for those who ran for the general elections. There are so many. And on top of that, promoting of replating of our fine mats to the perfection that it was in the olden days, not the rubbish that we used to have, as well as education, the setting up of our own university, as well as for government to meet school fees for children in the primaries. And we have also moved to begin from next year, if we were elected, the government paying for university education fees, as well as paying for the teachers for private schools. We had so many.
Yes.
You cannot pinpoint one.
And I think my next question. What were the lows of your career? Would you say that the last 2 elections would be, the lowest, or what were, the lowest of your career?
Losing an election. Not so much that I lost the leadership as well, but more for the people that depend so much on us, to ensure that we inject the rule of law, that we follow the rule of law and good governance principles of transparency and accountability. As it is now, we don't have that anymore.
And I just wanted to ask, speaking of the future, Lauwhianga Tuilaipa, are there any plans for you to step down in the near future, or would you wait until HRPP win another election?
No, this is my last term.
When you say last term, are we speaking months, a year?
To the end of this term.
End of this term.
Not necessarily the leadership to continue.
Say come the next general election and HRPP lose, just saying, you would still retire?
Yeah.
Are there any?
I have reached that stage where really I should retire.
That was Samoa's opposition leader, Tuilaipa Sailele Malielingauoi, speaking to our reporter, Grace Viva-Ai. Wellington City councillors have approved the transfer of land to the Whale Malai Trust. The trust is behind a new Pasifika cultural centre for the country's capital to promote and share New Zealand's Pacific heritage. In May, the government ended its financial support of the trust after only 2.7 million of the allocated 10 million had been spent since funding was granted in Budget 2020. The government reallocated the money to other arts projects. Trust board member Lua Manuvao Dame Winnie Laban told Moira Tulepa Taylor what the vote means.
For us, we could not progress the project without getting lands transfer approval from the Wellington City Council. And you can imagine there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes, with the administration, with the mayor and the councillors, and just making sure all the boxes are ticked. So that was a critical outcome on September the 11th this year when the Trust and many of our supporters went to meet with Council and they took a vote. And we got 16 who voted for the land transfer approval and 1 against. And that was very encouraging because we've also submitted a application, our resource consent application. There were about 70 submissions and I think 68 or 67 or around that number are supportive of the Trust and the Whale Malai especially. So a final decision on resource consent will probably come in December and we were very, very happy, especially with that result with Wellington City Council.
And I just wanted to ask, so obviously the Trust took a little bit of a funding hit after losing government funding. Do you think it was a setback for the Trust?
Well, we have a very resilient Trust, and as you know, they've been working together for a very long time. And it actually started probably around 2012 with the Committee Pacifica at Victoria University with people like Adrian Orr and Adrian Wimmers. But at the end of the day, what is happening is we've sort of looked at the overall cost of, say, it'll probably be 40 million, but part of the raising the capital means that we'll be working with central government to re-secure that investment in the project. So we are working on a business case to go back to central government if they could reinvest the money that they actually cut last time.
And in terms of the transfer of the land, how long is that lease?
It'll be pretty long term, and I think, at an affordable arrangement. But as you know, it's just so good that we've secured that, and we've got really good legal minds, engineer minds, economist minds on the Trust and working with us to make sure that all that is affordable and sustainable.
And next steps, what are the next steps for the Trust?
Hopefully the resource consent will go through before the end of December. We've got a fabulous fundraising team and plan that are now focusing on raising the funds. So that will also include approaching philanthropy, but also many other stakeholders and many other, including our communities, who are really keen to contribute.
It's been another full weekend of sport with Manu Samoa fans disappointed once again as the team fails to qualify for the 2027 Rugby World Cup. But all is not lost, they've got one more chance. And the Cook Islands come out as the best performing Pacific team at the Youth Netball World Cup in Gibraltar. I'm joined by senior sports journalist Iliesa Tora for Aotearoa. Ola Iliesa, Manu Samoa fell short again in Chile on Sunday morning in their bid to claim a spot at the 2027 Rugby World Cup. Can you take us through what had happened and what's next for them?
Yes, Bula Vinaka. Unfortunately, Manu Samoa were not able to finish off with what they were expecting. They were going into the game with a focus on trying to win a World Cup spot for 2027 in Australia. The previous week, they had played Chile in Salt Lake City. They came from behind and claimed a 32-all draw. And it looked as if they were going to do that again in the second half against Chile when Chile had led 18-7 at halftime. So in the second half, Samoa went into action and they controlled the ball for the first 20 minutes of that half, but they were not able to break the Chilean defense. And Chile hung on and came back strongly in the last quarter of the game to score the points that they needed, penalties, tries, and they managed to win 31-12. So in that process, Chile has qualified for the World Cup, while Samoa now heads into the final qualification, which is going to be held in Dubai in November. Unfortunately for Samoa, at least 10 players were unavailable after the first game in Salt Lake City the week before. And these players, 4 of them, including Captain Michael Alatoa, had to return to their clubs in Europe. Michael going back to Clermont in France. There were some who were injured, and some, for personal reasons, had made themselves unavailable, including playmaker Christian Lefano. So Samoa went into that game with a number of new players that they had to call in as replacements, and that showed in the later stages of the second half when they were not able to break the Chilean defense and lost in the process. Fortunately for them, they still have one more chance. And if they win the final qualification in Dubai in November, then they will qualify for Australia 2027.
All right, moving along, we've got netball teams from the Pacific who are part of the Youth Netball World Cup. How did they do at that event, and what's the latest on the results?
Yes, there were 4 Pacifica teams that were at the Youth World Cup, Netball World Cup in Gibraltar. And Cook Islands was the only team that was able to make it into the top 8. Cook Islands finished 8th at the tournament after they lost 61-54 to Malawi. That means that for the next Youth World Cup, Cook Islands will miss the qualification round because they would have qualified automatically for that next World Cup meet. Then Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga were the other teams that were in action on Saturday. And Fiji beat Malaysia 56-48. Samoa finished 9th after they beat Wales 67-53. So all in all, they had very strong pool matches. They had Australia, they had England, they had Malawi, they had South Africa, the top teams in the world that they had to compete against in the different 4 pools that they were in. And Cook Islands were the only team that managed to get into the quarterfinal, as I said before. Fiji, unfortunately, lost to Malawi in what could have been the game that could have pushed them into the top 8. They lost 52-51 in a round-robin pool game. So as it stands, Cook Islands is in the top 8. Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga are in the top 12 positions after the Youth World Cup.
We've also seen some football action over the weekend featuring Pacific teams. What's the update on that?
Yes, right now the Oceania Under-19 Women's Championship is happening out there in Tahiti. As of Saturday, Fiji and the Cook Islands have qualified from Group A, and New Zealand had qualified from Group B with the possibility of Tahiti, who beat Vanuatu at the weekend. Tahiti possibly can go into the semifinals as well, and that game will be decided. That result will be decided later on Monday, early Tuesday morning. So Cook Islands and Fiji have qualified. Tonga have missed out of Group A. Unfortunately, Samoa withdrew from the tournament because of financial issues, but Samoa are already playing in the Under-20s World Cup this year. The winner from Tahiti will qualify as the Oceania first team going into the World Cup, and the runner-up, so the 2 teams that appear in the final later this week, will qualify for the World Cup in the Under-20s in 2026.
Thank you, Eliesa, for our Pacific Sports update. That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā, sui fua.